Ryan, thank you for being here with me today. Now, a bill has been filed in the Texas legislature that would mandate the Ten Commandments be placed in schools. Your thoughts on the legislation?
I mean, facially, it's deeply unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has been very clear on this. In Stone v. Graham, they said the purpose of the Ten Commandments rather is fundamentally religious. There's no real secular purpose to establishing or to posting the Ten Commandments. So the ground has been set for this. The Supreme Court has weighed in. It's deeply unconstitutional, both on a federal level and it violates the Texas state constitution as well. So
You mentioned it's unconstitutional. There are other states that have filed similar legislation. Louisiana comes to mind. Now that has undergone legal battles, but the Supreme Court hasn't stepped in yet. So even with that, do you feel as though it's unconstitutional?
yeah, I mean, we are a party in the lawsuit in Louisiana. So right now it's in the Fifth Circuit, or it went up to the Fifth Circuit, and it got kicked back down to the district court. The district court issued a preliminary injunction, just basically saying, hey, don't do this because we believe it to be unconstitutional, just on what the Supreme Court has said and does say in Stone v. Graham. So right now, the Louisiana Ten Commandments is straight, frankly, it's on hold because the courts down there believe that this is unconstitutional.
Now, what impact you feel this bill would have if it actually were to pass and become law in Texas?
Yeah, so the main thing we're looking out for, and I want to be very clear about this, is standing up for students' rights. We think students have the fundamental right to attend a public school free from coercion, and religious proselytization, right? So this is going to alienate students who are not Christian, who are Christian of a different sect, because let's be very clear about this. There are two different bills right now going through Texas for Ten Commandments, and they say different things. So the legislature has to pick which version of the Ten Commandments they put up in schools. So you're not only pitting Christianity versus other religions and non-religion, but you're also pitting different versions of Christianity against each other. It's going to alienate so many people. Students are going to feel ostracized because they don't adhere to such a belief. And that's the one thing we want to avoid is making students feel unwelcome in their public school where they have the fundamental right to be.
Now, you mentioned there's another bill in Texas talking about the Ten Commandments. Of course, this interview is focused on Senate Bill 10, but what other bill are you referring to?
Senate Bill 2116.
2116. And what does that call for, just in case our audience is unaware?
Yeah, so it calls for an erection of the Ten Commandments or a display of the Ten Commandments, but it's just a different, the wording is different. I think there are actually 10 commandments in that one. In Senate Bill 10, there's ironically 11 commandments. Yeah, the language is very different, and I can get you that language. I have too many pop-ups on my screen right now, or too many tabs open to find it right now. But Senate Bill 2116.
And speaking of language, we talk about some other similar legislation that has passed. We talked about Louisiana. Senate Bill 10 in particular, did it stick out to you in any way? Was the language different? Is it different from other similar laws we've seen across the nation?
It's largely the same. So I think largely it's the same. Nothing stood out as completely egregious as far as this goes in relation to other bills. And what a lot of the arguments that you're going to hear is that these are secular values, right? Where, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, don't steal, things of that nature. But what's often overlooked is the first two lines. I am the Lord thy God. Nobody should have a God other than me, right? So there's no way to really spin those to be secular. That is inherently exclusive, and that's all that is. So yeah.
Now, I'm curious, a lot of those that support this, some of them will argue that the Bible has played a significant role in American history, and as a result, the Ten Commandments should be displayed in schools. Your thoughts on that argument?
Yeah, so the argument that the Bible played such a significant portion in American history, that is a myth. It's to somewhat of a myth that is perpetuated by this pseudo historian and debunked historian David Barton. So David Barton is a pseudo historian with the Wall Builders. He has this organization called the Wall Builders. He wrote a book back in 2012, I think, called The Jefferson Lies, aptly titled, that got pulled from its shelf because of inaccuracies. So that's kind of what we're working with here, is the fact that the Bible had such, or the myth that the Bible had such a strong, influence on the founders is a myth. And I would actually say that displaying the Ten Commandments in schools, if you want to take this historical approach, which I'm certainly happy to do, I would say that displaying the Ten Commandments in schools directly contradicts what our founding fathers, wanted. They weren't, ignorant of religion. They weren't ignorant of the Bible. But I think the fact that they weren't, and they knew, and many of them were religious, a lot of them were deists, I think that's a part that gets overlooked. But the fact that they knew, religion existed, they came from Europe, they saw what Europe was doing in implementing religion in their governments and implementing a Christian God in their constitutions at that time, and they made the conscious decision not to do it. I think that's the most telling part about what the founding fathers really wanted as far as religion playing a role in our society.
Is there anything else you would like to tell our audience about Senate Bill 10?
No, I really don't think so. I think that, it is fundamentally unconstitutional on two levels. It violates the Establishment Clause of the federal Constitution. That's been settled in Stone v. Graham, but it also violates Section 1 or Article 1, Section 6, I'm sorry, of the Texas Constitution, and the no preference clause there. And that relevant portion of that clause says no preference shall be given by any law to any religious society or mode of worship. And kind of like I was saying earlier, in even the legislature deciding which version of the Ten Commandments to post, they are then showing a preference, right? So they're deciding between different sects of Christianity, and by virtue, breaking the no preference clause of the Texas Constitution.
Does the Freedom from Religion Foundation plan on challenging this bill in particular if it were to become law, or even before, potentially, if it were to become law?
Yeah, so that's not something I can necessarily speak to. I'm not an attorney. I'm not one of our attorneys. But, like I did say, we are a party to a lawsuit in Louisiana right now, and we feel like that's going quite well. So we will explore options if need be.